So, welcome everybody. Welcome, obviously, first off, to Salford Quays. You've got maps in your bags. I'm sure some of you have already been round and explored the museums across the water and the BBC next door. There's lots to see. And one of the things I like most about this area is that it is now home to more people than it was 100 years ago. It was quite desolate and quiet in the middle, but there are more people working here now than 100 years ago when it was docks, when the Manchester Ship Canal brought the cotton in to the quays. And that's a nice thing to remember. And we're here now at the heart, the beating heart of Salford Quays. A little bit of housekeeping. You will have discovered where the lifts are, and the toilets are right next to the lifts. And we have two rooms, this one, obviously, and on the third floor, which is why you might be interested in finding the lift, we're also in 310. So there's two tracks, one in here and one upstairs in 310. There's no planned fire escape thingy, fire alarm, that's right. So if it does go off, we all have to leave the building. And it's very, very polite, the fire alarm. It says, please make your way to the exits. So you'll know what's going on. But there's nothing planned, and I'm sure there'll be no problem. Second off, of course, welcome to the 12th Human Choice and Computers Conference. Thank you, all of you, for travelling, some of you a very, very long way, to join in this marvellous latest edition of a stupendous conference series that's been going now since 1974. And we at Salford are very privileged to be able to present to you the 12th edition. I'm going to talk very briefly about some, first looks at some of the papers that we're going to have, and then, of course, I'm going to, with great pleasure, introduce the first of our keynotes. So, just a quick note there about the fact that this is the 12th edition. The first Human Choice and Computers Conference, back in 1974, really set the tone for all of the HCCs thereafter. And it's about being at the cutting edge of innovative thinking about the interface between the social and technology. And it's a critical perspective that has been a hallmark of HCC all the way through. And that critical perspective, obviously, certainly since HCC5, but increasingly as the years have gone by, has been very much part of what some people call the ethical turn. And the ethics of computing has become a really core part of what HCC and its critical perspective has concentrated upon. And of course, part of that shift has been that we've been talking less about the hardware of computers and more about the information that computing technologies enable us to share. So there's a little graph to show how this has happened. If you look back at HCC1, I couldn't get a chapter out of HCC6, unfortunately, and the preface for HCC11 was a bit short, so I haven't included 6 and 11, but over the time you can see that people have been talking less about work in the Human Choice and Computers series, and gradually more about the personal and about what's going on at home. And equally, the ethical turn, which kind of began with HCC5, has really made an impact over the last few conferences. So HCC12 is no different. It keeps up that tradition. And as we said in our introduction, while editors might speculate on what their conference will look like, it is ultimately the authors who structure and shape the final experience. and who now lay down the next layer in the historical record of HCC. And unsurprisingly, the bulk of the papers are focused around the ethical turn, looking at information, looking at data, specifically around healthcare, quite a few papers around the ethical considerations around the elderly, and of course about privacy. But there's also a stream of papers around communications, making use of ICTs for good, or tech for good, ICTs for good. There's quite a strong thread of theory throughout all the papers in HCC, but particularly in some groups. And of course, there's always talk about social networking sites, but also about intimacy, about augmented reality, and about the experience on mobile. And lastly, there's 3 or 4 papers, I say 3 or 4, on futures, because the 4th is actually looking at the past and remembering that in order to understand the future, we must understand also the history that has brought us to the present. So you can concentrate on the ethics stream, you can concentrate on the communications stream, you could add in the future stream, or actually cutting across all those 3, you can pick out the ones that are strongest on theory. There are lots of opportunities for you to enjoy between the 2 rooms a range of different papers. I'm hoping that all our chairs will keep the 1-hour sessions to 2 30-minute sessions so that people can move between the rooms. It only takes 2 or 3 minutes to go up and down those stairs, or up and down the lift. And of course, with all of the papers, we've also managed to be very fortunate to attract 2 fantastic keynote speakers who are speaking really closely to the conference theme. Today, we have Charles S., who's standing strategically behind me. And tomorrow, Ghislaine, who will be both talking around the notion of machines and intimacy, or as the newspapers and the TV and the radio have been picking up on, sex robots. So without further ado, to speak very precisely to that topic, can I introduce Professor Charles S., who I'm